Jag tänker dricka kaffe i alla fall. Jag hoppas ni gör detsamma. Okej. Hejsan! Det är jättetrevligt att vara här. And we'll do this in English, like we said, right? It's good to be here, speaking in English to a completely Swedish room for the recording. Hello, recording. This is for you. No worries, I always do almost all my presentations in English. Once I did a presentation in Danish, technical Azure presentation in Danish, and they said I did okay. So I can fake mostly Danish, because I'm from Skåne. And if we were to do this in Swedish, we would have had the option of either doing it in English or in Skånska, which, you know, that could have been a thing. And then somebody always says from the audience, well, then better do it in English, because Skåne, you know, that sucks. All right, so let's kick it off with this public cloud for public sector thing. Really? There's a saying that says that courage is knowing it might hurt and doing it anyway. Stupidity is the same, which is why life is hard. Hey, Johnny, welcome. Come on in, mate. Are you coming as well? What the fuck? Did I just say that on the... Okay. Well, torn off that Band-Aid to begin with. That's wonderful. You swore as well in your session, I remember. All right, so transitioning from this slide to a slide with my customer on it maybe isn't the best idea I've had in my life. But to be honest, is it crazy to use the public cloud for public sector? Not really. I would say it's brave. It's also one of those Don Quixote scenarios where there's lots of windmills and things. This is hard. And I think we need to talk about this. And I have received... I'm a consultant, right? I work for my own company, so I have gone through proper channels and received permission to mention that I work for Region Skåne, so that I am allowed to say that. I'm a consultant in their core team, which means that I say we about Region Skåne, because I'm not one of the major suppliers and so forth. So I'm in the core setup of their team. Special about Region Skåne is that it is one large IT organization for everything public sector in Region Skåne except for Skånetrafiken. The one thing that is not in Region Skåne IT, but everything else is there. So it's quite large. And so they have all of those challenges that you may or may not suspect. And we're going to talk about those here today. There is a cloud group that I'm a part of, which is more like the strategic group. And then there's a platform team. And currently we're actually talking about how to set this platform team up. What is the responsibilities and how far do these responsibilities of the platform team reach is a conversation that we're having. And trying to understand and adapt as we go along. My name is Magnus. I think you know that, hopefully, if you read the session description and the speaker bio. I've been doing Azure for a long time. Gosh, it's years now. If I have a claim to fame, then it is that I was the first to be an Azure MVP for Microsoft in the Nordic countries, which means that I have 13 consecutive Azure MVP titles at this point. So it's been a while. Azure is not a baby, it's a teenager now. And so I've been doing it for a very long time. And I usually joke about that, and I say I'm sure, and I know that there are really, really good people that know a lot about Azure, and I'm like better at Azure than I am. Well, at least they haven't done it longer. So there's that. And I also have another funky title. This one, I'm a Microsoft Regional Director. That's weird because I don't work for Microsoft, I don't have a region, and I don't direct anything. But it means that I like to hang out with Microsoft and you know, talk to them actually at a pretty high level. There's about 200 regional directors in the world, and I'm thankful to be one of them. I also love doing community stuff. So Global Azure is one thing that I have been part of setting up. The other original initiator of Global Azure is in fact here as well, one of the speakers. It's Alan Smith. So we kind of started it, quote unquote, but we very quickly got many friends to join in and be part of this effort. And each year we are, there's hundreds of communities out there that are organizing events for the global Azure event, and we're doing something together on that day. So those are kind of things that I like to do. I don't know boundaries very well, as you can see. This is the world. That's the kind of stuff that I like to do. And you? What about you? I have a question for you. Any public sector people here who works in public sector? A few. Who works for public sector as a supplier? Also, some more. Yeah, welcome, everyone. So I hope that this can be, I'm pretty sure that it's going to be mostly me talking, but if you have something that you want to add or ask me to go deeper on something, please just jump in and say so and raise a hand or otherwise participate. That's perfectly fine. This is just going to be conversational, because it's not like I can crack open Visual Studio Code and show you exactly how to do things here. This is about other topics that are mostly technology adjacent or related to architecture and those kinds of concerns. That's what we're talking about. So if you're good with that, please stay. Otherwise, there are other sessions. If you find something more interesting, you should go to those. But this is what we're going to do here. So I think it is really important to talk about these real quote-unquote challenges, to be brave, like Region Skåne. It's not easy to do this. It's not easy to use public cloud when you're a public sector like Region Skåne. But we are doing it. We're trying, right? And of course there are challenges. Of course we make mistakes. I'm not here specifically to highlight mistakes. I'm also not here to whine. Magnus rants for an hour. That's not the session. But dang it. But really it is about being truthful about these challenges and bringing them up, because I think it's really important that we talk about these things. And the more people talk about it, I think the better. So we can share that pain, I guess, but knowledge as well, and hopefully make it better. So, where did we begin? Well, we began with stuff like this. And here's a hint, right? Whenever a presenter makes a slide like this with lots of text on it, it's not for you to memorize. It's not going to be a quiz later. But I wanted to highlight that there's lots of reasons why there are challenges. There are lots of things that you have been doing for many years, and now you're going to be doing something maybe slightly different, and there are new rules. And how do you actually stop doing the thing that you have been doing for so many years? You don't even know at some points in public sector why you're doing something. You're doing it because you've always done it that way. You don't know exactly. And I see so many people nodding. They just go, yeah, exactly. Right? This is the normal standard thing. All these people who work in IT in public sector can be, so experienced, really good engineers and various people. So there's no shadow falling over them. They're just a product of their environment, and maybe they don't have mileage yet in using cloud. And these are very important concerns to address when doing that transition or starting on that journey to become more cloudy as a public sector organization. We're not going to really talk specifically so much about the cloud adoption framework. How many have seen and heard about the cloud adoption framework? Some, but very many have not. So the cloud adoption framework, thank you. The cloud adoption framework is a body of work, if you will, that Microsoft have collected together over years from experiences with many customers and molded it into this massive reference work that you could apply to your organization, I guess. But I mean, it's going to be challenging because there's around 810 markdown files and about 1,000 images. There are Visio files. This is huge, huge. And even if you were to be able to, as an organization, consume this and try to apply it to your situation, I think mostly you would end up with something that doesn't work anyway, because it's, as a reference case, it's really, really handy. But that's all it is. And it's really good to, if you're doing something like strategic planning or whatever you're doing, just go in there and see. Like, oh, have we thought about everything? Because a bunch of things will be listed in there, and you will be able to see if, like, oh, right, there's this thing as well. We forgot about that. And that's how I use the cloud adoption framework mostly. But what I want to point out is that, let's go back one slide. This looks like a very straightforward journey. You take step 1 and you finish step 1, and you take step 2 and you finish step 2, and you know in reality that nothing is like that. You step back and forward and all over the place, and you look like you're dancing in best case, or like a flailing moron in most cases. But what we need to talk about is a lot of the things that are outside of technology. That is technology right there, right? And some way down the road. And managing and governing this, basically I work a lot here, if you will. But I also work a lot with making it easier for everyone who is building and deploying applications and infrastructure to the cloud. So I'm kind of making this work is my job, if you will. And there are lots of things that we miss if we start approaching this as a technical thing, right? And I think you all know this, right? Because if you don't know why, and if you don't have a plan, planning is everything, following a plan is useless, right? But still doing some planning and adjusting as you go is crucial. And we need to talk about the strategy stuff and the plan stuff first. So we are working on a strategy document, which is not yet signed, approved by a high enough director of Region Skåne. So we are already technically doing it, but the strategy isn't really approved, set, fixed. At least we're working on a strategy at all, which I think is good. So strategy. It is really important to know why you're doing something, aka the strategy. Are we going to the cloud because we want it to be cheaper? Because we want it to be more secure? And so on and so forth. You can make a list of these things and figure out what is important for you. In here probably are the reasons for going to the cloud. The thing is, you can't have all of these things, especially at the same time, right? And you have to have a focus. Maybe you go into it thinking, we're going to save money. So that's important. Because the projection of the service level that we need to provide to the population of Region Skåne, it's projected to grow so and so much, and we need so and so much more services, and we only have this little money. So using cloud services is important for us to be able to deliver what we need to deliver. Sure. So sounds reasonable. Pay per use, cost efficient, that's important. Maybe that's the priority number 1. And then you start stepping into that space. And then you realize security, compliance, data governance, various things. Right. And then you realize that maybe security is something that is, we're talking medical information about population of Sweden, and this is hard. It has to be secure. We must be compliant. Well, can it then honestly also be cheap? Especially at the same time. Right? And we have to be honest about this and work on a strategy document. Why are we doing this? Do we know? And moreover, on an engineering level, how many people in here consider themselves a technical person, technical engineer kind of person? Most? Yeah, almost everyone in here actually. Not everyone, but many of us. Is it different if your strategy is to cost optimize first compared to ensure that the thing is secure first? Is it different, the technical things that you do? Of course it is, right? Obviously. So it's kind of important to ensure that there is a strategy and that this thing is communicated so people actually know what they're supposed to be focusing on. Because also, I'm not saying it will, but it's highly likely that focus is going to change over time. So then the strategy document needs to be revised and updated and communicated so that everybody knows that, well, it used to be, cost savings or was the priority number one, but now we realize that we're not allowed to do certain things unless we prioritize security. Well, that's going to take a little longer. It's going to cost a little more in terms of at least man hours. And so we have to revise the plan and ensure that people understand what the focus really is. That's really the purpose of the strategy. Because if you don't have one, if you don't have a cloud strategy, what's going to happen? Right? What's going to happen is that people will just be doing random technical things because they're technical people. What they're doing is not technically wrong. They're doing great things, but maybe they don't have the same priorities and focus as the region does in its strategies, in this case, right? So I've had this conversation actually here, a little bit in the hallways. Somewhere in a boardroom, some directors are having a meeting with, let's say, Microsoft, right? Because it's not a secret or anything. Region Skåne is using a lot of Azure. And if I'm on the team, well, it's probably Azure we're talking about, not AWS, because Azure is my groove. But somewhere in a boardroom somewhere, there's some directors or people high up in the organization of Region Skåne, and they're having a sales conversation with a person from Microsoft, right? And somewhere somebody buys an enterprise agreement or something. And now you shall use the cloud. They go and tell the engineers. The engineers be like, what? The what now? The how now? Can we even do that? Are we even allowed? Because we're public sector. Because of the data about, citizens' medical history and stuff, doesn't really chime well with being in a cloud platform, does it? Are we allowed to do this? Can we store these things in Europe? Can we even use Azure? And there are many things that we need to figure out. But there's a risk here that, and I've seen this, and not only with Region Skåne, I've seen this in many scenarios, that the decision is made elsewhere, and then we ask the engineers, right? Or tell the engineers, rather, you shall do this. And we love being told what to do, don't we? So an excerpt from the cloud strategy of Region Skåne. The purpose of this cloud strategy is to define how Region Skåne will use cloud services to achieve their technical and operational goals. The cloud offers Region Skåne possibilities to improve its efficiency, flexibility, scalability, innovation, and improve the end user experience, the customer service level of the region to the citizens of the region, right? Lofty, brilliant words. There's plenty more in the cloud strategy, but we kind of interpret this as our goal being to be an enabler as much as possible, to help the organization start using the cloud properly. Because again, I know I'll be jumping back and forth in my brain here when I'm talking. Again, with these people who are engineers, maybe who have been doing IT for 25 plus years or something like that, maybe don't know how to use cloud services or platform services in the cloud, for example. Let's take the most basic example. So there is a chance that they will be told to use the cloud. They will grumble about it and be annoyed. Why do I have to change something? It's really annoying. I've never needed to use the cloud before, and various things. And then they were like, okay, fine then, we'll just run that bloody migration wizard and migrate the application to the cloud. And look, we're in the cloud now, are you happy? But most of us who have cloud experience in here know that it's going to be quick and dirty. It might be functional, but it's not going to be great, is it? Not at least as a end station, right? You could migrate first if that's a thing you have to do to maybe for some reason time limitations, you have to get out of a data center, some kind of hardware renewal contracts and various things. That might be okay to migrate a bunch of things fast. But we all know, or those of us who have cloud experience know, that that is not going to be optimized. And it's not going to take the, you're not going to receive the best benefits of using the cloud platform that way. So we are working with some sort of overarching strategic goals when we are approaching this. The scalability factor, yes, we're also talking about, and there are other ways to scale, but the most known way to scale today is using Kubernetes. So Kubernetes is a part of our story as well, for better or for worse. I don't particularly subscribe to putting everything in Kubernetes because Kubernetes. That's not a good solution in my world. Some things should just be running on an app service, right? Don't have to use the tool because it exists. But scalability and elasticity is important. So auto scaling and these things are maybe not things that we are accustomed to using, because the scaling scenario for pre-cloud infrastructure is quite different than the more flexible elasticity of the cloud, right? Definitely faster delivery is important for the region. Back in the day, right, in classic IT pre-cloud, we would make a plan, a project plan for something. And it would include ordering hardware for a server, right? Either physical or virtual server, at least ordering the server, and you would be, okay, if it's a virtual machine, you give your specs, and they say, okay, we need to get more hardware into the data center or whatnot, right? So those things were a factor, but they're not now with the cloud. And what we are working to achieve is to ensure that everyone can get what they need when they need it. So there's an automation API story that we're building on. It's quite important. Availability and performance is important to us, as well as the power to focus on sort of core business rather than the IT complexities. So we want to remove that from our end users, our quote-unquote customers, the application teams that run and develop applications for the cloud. We still get those questions. Okay, you said I needed a landing zone. Do you know what a landing zone is? Some people know what a landing zone is, not everyone. It's essentially equals an Azure subscription, with some trimmings around it, like there's policy and naming standards and some good things in there, access control and things that we are working on to set up for them. But if somebody comes to us and says, we need to use Azure because we've been told to do so, or we're going to Azure same as everyone else, cool, we say we'll give you a landing zone, which essentially means a subscription. And they're like, okay, I don't know why I need to order a landing zone, but I'll do it. Fill out the, there's cost tagging and things involved here, so we know that the cost goes to the right place and so forth. And then they fill all that stuff out, and everything's cool. And then the next question is, okay, now that we have this landing zone that you said we needed to have, how do I order a VM? This is the real question we're getting. And some people in here laugh, right? And I think it's fair to snicker a little bit about it, really. So long as we're not being offensive and insulting, because these people are proud and good working, earnest engineers. They just don't know what to ask for. it's not really someone's fault if they don't have mileage in the cloud. Maybe ordering a VM to run an operating system on a hybrid machine there, or a VM, and then installing SQL Server on that VM, and then running one database in that VM is not necessarily a great idea in the cloud. Same as let's run an IIS server in the cloud. That's also a really bad idea. Except that if that's all you've ever done, and those are all the tools that you've ever had, you don't necessarily know about a database as a service. You don't necessarily know about the app service in the cloud. So you can't really be, quote unquote, faulted for not knowing. So the question is earnest, and then you kind of have to start helping them, because at the end of the day, of course, money. Right? Money is a driving factor for most of this, and we are under pressure, same as everyone. We have a limited budget, we have a growing population, we have a high demand of service, and we're supposed to deliver on this. And it's not easy. So it needs to be cost effective. And going back to that VM, it's probably not going to be the most cost effective approach. It's going to technically work, but it's not going to be the best. So we have to start picking that apart and instructing and helping and showing where to go. So there really have to be, there must be a training and competence plan involved here. Some people will go be dragged kicking and screaming into the cloud because they don't want to change. We have to be mindful about those people as well. They are in our organizations, and in public sector, some people have worked there for a long time. They maybe have not so many years until retirement, and all of a sudden somebody comes and tells you something really, really uncomfortable, and you now have to learn something new. And they just don't want to. And that's hard. And that's something you have to have in a competence plan. I usually say that the most important person in the boardroom where the cloud strategy is being discussed is the HR director. That is the most important person, because they have to understand the implications in the staffing and in the skill set that using the cloud to achieve the goals that you really want to in your strategy plan. Oh, it's going to be so much faster, it's going to be so much cheaper, it's going to be so much more, all the things. Well, you can't reach those goals unless you have a plan for how to advance, enhance, progress the skill set of the people who work in your organization. Hundreds of them, maybe. Thousands? Well, lots anyway. And many of them have never had the opportunity before to work with cloud technology, because up until just now, that wasn't allowed. So they've been working same as they have for a long time with traditional IT. And now it's cloud time, so this is important. Then this Cloud Center of Excellence name, I don't love that name. And it's gotten a really bad rep, because a lot of people are like, well, those, ivory tower architects are just sitting around, imagining things and telling us what to do, and we can't do what we want, and nobody's listening to us. And so the name Cloud Center of Excellence, I have come across that this has gotten a really bad rep. And you have to be mindful about this and invite the skill set of the other people who work in the organization, and ensure that there is a way for good ideas to be maybe taken in with credits to the people who envisioned that, take in their idea and help spread it so that more can benefit from that idea. Using, let's go with a module registry for bicep deployments, right? That could be a thing. That could be a thing we could share technically, right? Because if there is a deployment of a SQL database which is compliant and securely set up and properly connected to a private endpoint and whatnot, all the things you can do, and one team has figured out how to do that, why should the next team also figure out the same thing? And next team figure out the same thing? Obviously not. That's a good thing to share, possibly. But it's not easy to do, and not invented here syndrome is a thing. So maybe they don't want to use the shared modules. So you have to start working on a community collaborative style where value is shared inside of the organization. For no other reason than for scaling reasons and time consumption, right? Because if team A, B, and C are figuring out the same thing, you spend 3 times as much time. You don't spend a third if you're sharing. You have to actually figure out and share the knowledge as well, but it's going down towards a third at least. So that's an important thing as well. Operations is no secret which large suppliers a public sector organization are working with. That's no secret at all. It's publicly known because it has to be. It's offentlig upphandling. It's purchased, right? It's known who wins the contract. So I can say that Region Skåne, for example, works with Telia. For example, works with the Tieto, right? As big suppliers, massive suppliers of huge services that the region really needs and really wants to work with these organizations, absolutely, no doubt. Operations, that becomes very interesting in the relation to operations. So, briefly, we want to be able to report to the, how shall I put this politically correctly? To the bean counters, the muggles, the non-magical folks, the Excel people. We need to be able to report to them to get buy-in from them so they understand, because they don't care about tech. They could care less about deployments and bicep templates and things. They don't have no idea what that is. But we are also dependent on them, and we want them to be on board. So we need to ensure that they have something useful to look at. Hopefully interactive, but mostly at least a trend graph or something. That's very important in our planning as well. So I think that goes in early, if you will, right? Start with the buy-in, ensure that there is something for the director to look at. This is how many new subscriptions, or this is the consumption cost increase over time, or something that they care about, right? And also cloud-first policy is interesting. We are working on it. It's not super easy to do. It's easy to say, it's hard to do. So what we're doing in this space, is laying the foundation for having a decision matrix and doing architectural review on systems. Because if you're working in public sector, or if you're working for public sector, you know that before you can actually do something, it shall be architecturally reviewed by a review board and approved and various things, right? Are we doing the right thing here? And in this, we are talking about a decision matrix for compute hosting, or for the application hosting. Like I said, we have Kubernetes in this space as well. You know, Kubernetes is funny. We're still working on making it a platform service. It really isn't. For the application developer team, it can be a platform service, because that's what they see, right? It's a platform service for us. We just deploy it somewhere and it runs. But for the IT department, it's not a platform service yet, or fully, or will it ever be? I don't know. That remains to be seen, because the IT department needs to manage a cluster and patch things and do things still, and that's not a platform service in my book. That's still an infrastructure service. But that's just one option. And how to decide for people who don't know which compute options are in the box, right? They maybe take the decision to move an application or a service from the on-premises systems into a containerized deployment into a Kubernetes cluster somewhere. Maybe they make that decision. Based on what is my question, right? Did you consider other options? Well, did they first know that these other options actually exist? Like an app service, you know? I usually say go for the simplest possible one, if no other reason, like it's because then it's simple. So if your application is maybe just a web app or an API or something like that, it's highly likely that's going to run really well on an app service. Will it be the most cheap one? Could it be cheaper to run in a Kubernetes cluster? Sure. If you have a lot of Kubernetes up and running and you are really, really well set up for managing that and you're optimized in terms of how you work with it and so forth, it could be cheaper to run the same thing in a cluster if you're already running tons of applications in the cluster. That could be. It's not necessarily true, but it can be the case. It depends on where you are. So we are working on ensuring that there is a decision matrix with essentially at the far end of the matrix, there's like, VM, Kubernetes or containerized and, some options for the compute, and then like deciding where to go. You answer, if you answered mostly B, then the answer is app service or something like that, right? Something like that to support these people, because it's important for us that every workload is evaluated on its own merits. The skill of the team that is going to run it is a factor, maybe not necessarily the deciding factor, but it is an important factor. If you have a team that has 12 applications in a Kubernetes cluster already, odds are they're going to suggest let's put the 13th one in the same thing. Maybe the 13th one should go in a freaking app service, right? But, it's just easier to do the same thing we're used to. And I see your hand there, which can be then the case for somebody going, okay, I had VMs before, so I'll just use a VM in the cloud, right? Because that's what I know. I know a VM. I don't know about this app service thing, but I know a VM. You have a question or a comment? Mm-hmm.
Because you're not subscribing to a 10-year SLA agreement with
yeah.
a server or something.
Yeah, yeah.
And you can change it if you need to scale it or something. Then you go to Kubernetes.
That's a great observation. So for the recording, the observation is that isn't that a good thing about the cloud, that you could start out with using an app service and maybe then scale it there and work with it there and have it there, and then later you can change your mind because you don't have like a 10-year agreement on a physical hardware in a data center somewhere. You can just change your mind. Absolutely right. And I think maybe I have in my slides somewhere, possibly, the thing that vendor lock-in, actually I know it's in my slides somewhere, vendor lock-in could be a thing, but mostly that's an architectural decision, right? A good architected application can be hosted in many different types of compute. You can change it enough to host it where it runs the best. You're correct. Let's talk a little bit more about the planning stuff. So to achieve great things, two things are needed: a plan and not quite enough time. And I think that's true for most of the things that we do. I just find that quote really funny. So planning for change. So again, with the guidance thing, we just covered that. How is this application going to be hosted? As an architectural conversation and understanding, the architectural review board, which approves the architecture of applications before they are allowed to be deployed to production, will contain a, did you fill out the matrix thing? Did you discuss which options are good? And our goal here is to get to a point where we get that strategy document that we talked about signed at a high enough level so that some IT director has signed off on that, and then essentially becomes the rule book or the, governing or the direction you have to take when it says cloud first. So we're hoping to get to a point, we're not exactly there yet, but actually, funny enough, the other day from someone who was using services in the region said that, well, that's actually already kind of been communicated to us, and we are working in that way, and that made me really happy that they understand somewhere, at least some people in the organization already understand that, yes, it's supposed to be cloud first. And that's brilliant. But we will have that as a gate here. Have you considered which is the best solution for hosting this application architecturally? Where should it be running? Maybe it's really great for this application to run in a Kubernetes cluster, containerized. Perfect. Well, at least now we know because you consider the options, right? And that's so important because then it's not going to be this, I know how to do a VM, so I'm going to just use a VM in the cloud. I'm just going to migrate. And then I'm in the cloud, so I'm checking the box in the cloud. We're done. No, we're not done. We haven't even started. So again, moving first, and then going for those low-hanging fruit. And I already gave that example with the database, right? So we did an inventory together with Microsoft of, I'm not going to say exactly how many, but hundreds, let's say thousands of servers in the region, in the various different data centers that the region has. Essentially, cut it in half. And you'll be cloud over here. Essentially cut it in half and say, what can we put in the cloud like now? Well, things that are not so much personal data, medical data, hospital systems, those things are candidates. These you'll be non-cloud over here. You are servers, and here we run the patient care systems and various things, and let's not even begin to consider this half now. We're just talking about the things that we could really see moving in the first wave, if you will, because they're not so critical and not so difficult to move. But in that, there are many servers in the region, and all of these servers, among them, there's a good number of servers that is one server, one operating system, one SQL server, one database. You have a good number of those because that's how you made IT planning in the past, right? That's how it worked. So those are kind of low-hanging fruit in my book because essentially mostly you can just copy that database to the database service in the cloud and change the connection string and off you go to the races. It works. Yay. No more VM. That's easy. All right. So what about vendor lock-in? Going back to that question. So you are public sector, you will have hybrid for the reason I just said, right? There are patient care systems and various things. You will be hybrid. And you have to also be able to still operate things because it's national critical infrastructure like hospital care and things like that. So it has to actually work even if somebody sends a Scud missile into an Azure data center, right? It still needs to work. So that's important. In this consideration, I'm just going to muse a little bit on that. Have you ever changed hosting before? Why is now such a critical juncture to talk about vendor lock-in? You have never talked about this before. Seems like a way to object rather than to embrace the changes that you need to do. But again, this is a governance, data governance and an architectural decision, where and how you host things. You can change that if you're a good architect and you have a good team of technical people who will implement that. So should definitely not go for multi-cloud because multi-cloud, we are so big, so we must use more than one cloud platform. That's a stupid decision. Highly likely you will still maybe have more than one cloud. Especially in acquisitions and stuff like that, doesn't necessarily happen that much in public sector. But essentially what decision that we have made is that it is Azure, which is the public cloud. And if there is a real reason for using something else from like Oracle Cloud or whatnot, right, then we could do that as well. But my rant here is that many of these offerings that you see out there in the market are just some offering with the word cloud in it. Doesn't make it a cloud. There are public clouds, and then there are other really great offerings from great companies that provide a great service called something cloud. Doesn't make it a cloud. And don't use Kubernetes because Kubernetes, we've already talked about this. But when you do use Kubernetes, because not all applications should be hosted in those kinds of environments, as we have been talking about already. I told you that I tend to speak ahead of my slides. So, right, we've already talked about this. Brilliant. We're moving on. Question for you. audience interaction. How many services in a public cloud vendor platform does a organization use before they will never leave that vendor? How many? What do you think? Yes. Anyone venture a guess? It's just a number. It doesn't matter. That's a good.
Like 10%, and then if people start to
Yeah.
use
Just give me a real, like a number. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 20, 100. 2, 3, 1. There's good data. There's good solid statistics to suggest that the number is 5. So, if an organization uses 5 different services from a vendor, they're never going to leave them. They are now chosen to lock themselves into using services from this vendor. There's good numbers to support this. This is just food for thought. So if you're using a storage account, a key vault, a database, an app service, and a service bus, a what? An app configuration. That's it. You're done. You have now chosen your cloud vendor platform forever. That's funny. I think it's funny. All right. So breaking up with the past. This is so difficult. This is really, really one of the biggest challenges that we have. So this is how we've always done it. We must use the central steering system because we ask, what are the requirements? Because we got into this when we were talking about governance of identities and access control, right? So our question back was, okay, what are the requirements? So we figured out the requirements are not, the central steering system is not the requirement, right? That's the system we use, or the system we have been using for a very, very long time. Now, if we want to start granting access to users, developers, people to work inside of the cloud environments in the Azure Cloud Platform, we're not going to use the central steering system. And that caused a bit of a ruckus. We just said we're not doing it. You tell us which the regulations are, the requirements are that we need to live up to. And if there is something we have to do, like log who got which access and stuff, Azure logs who gets which access. That's logged already in the activity log in Azure. It's already there. So if there is a real requirement that requires us to save that information somewhere in a central logging system, something, tell us exactly what those requirements are. But what we will not do is take everything legacy and apply it to Azure, like the central steering system. We're not doing it. That requires a little bit of guts, and it can be a heated conversation. It hasn't been very heated, but it is an interesting one because you have to start breaking up with the past. We only have a few more minutes to go, and like I said initially a little bit, there's no way that we can cover a certain amount of things in this session before we come to the real end here. How many minutes do I have? It's supposed to be, hey, Jimmy, remaining minutes. It's only a few, right? Yes, that's exactly it. I know how many minutes I have. I just wanted to double check because you guys seem like you're fine with what I'm doing up here. But it's only a few more minutes. Cool. So I want to say before we run out of time that I will be here all week, right? No, I won't, but I will be here today and tomorrow. And please come and talk to me and so on and so forth, right? So just bear that in mind if you want to continue having this conversation. I can go on and on and on and on and on. So let's end sort of on this thinking here. I think what we want to achieve. This is just a sketch. It's not exact. But what we want to do over time-ish, is reduce cost, mostly. That's one really, really important factor. And when we start out, we don't have any cloud, right? And then as we go along, we'll have more cloud. And there will be new applications built in the cloud They will be migrated or transformed or re-architected, rehosted, whatever, right? And there's lots of R's in here. There's so many R's, right? Refactor, rehost, re-architect, redeploy, and all the things. But there are many actions to take on this journey that we are working on. Rehosting is sort of the first low-hanging fruit because it will be cheaper. When you start migrating, let's say that you pick up 700 virtual machines and plop them down on Azure, it's highly likely going to be cheaper than what it was before, after everything is said and done. But the transition can be hard, and then this thing here, that was immediately the first question I got. Why did it suddenly get more expensive? Well, it does get more expensive when you start refactoring things. Before it gets cheaper, it's going to get a little bit more expensive because you're doing things kind of double now, and you're spending time and energy, and the consumption before you settle will be higher, and the cost will be higher. And then over time, you start shutting off old things. You dismantle and remove things in the old data center, and on and on we go. Because I'm going to steal a little bit. Let's see. Because this one is so important, I don't want to leave you guys without talking about this, and it's maybe a contentious one to do as a final, but here we are. Again. No secret that Region Skåne is working with major suppliers. No secret that we like working with them, that we are dependent on them, and we want to continue working with them. All of that is cool. A really important conversation to have, and this could be maybe a takeaway for you, a really, really important conversation to have is to talk to these vendors and start deciding what they should do, deciding how they should deliver. Because, to be very blunt about it, they don't really always have an incentive in moving you as a public sector organization to the cloud. Because they are invested in status quo. Right? If we are, and this is not, I'm not accusing anyone, I'm not being, bad here, I'm telling the truth. If Region Skåne is buying hundreds of virtual machines and operations and management from the supplier Tieto, right? What's their incentive in moving services on these virtual machines, on these systems that are rented from their data centers, moving them to the public cloud of Region Skåne? Their incentive is not very great, is it? So if you're going that way, for various reasons, as an organization, you want it to be cheaper and all the things, right? You're going to have to start prying away services and systems from that supplier and putting them in the cloud platform, and then asking them to operate them in our cloud platform. They're losing money on that deal. That's a reality. And the change is happening whether anyone likes it or not, because we kind of have to. Right? We have to be more efficient with the money. There's more demand. There's less money. We have to do things. There's no other choice. So to leave you on that thought note here, we give access to them only to the things that they will operate, and we involve our major suppliers and invite them to help shaping that future with us, inviting them to continue to supply their services that we want to have and that we rely on, except now in our systems, because this is our decision, right? We want to natively control things like a single pane of glass scenario. And let me just give you this as maybe the final thought. I am part of the central governance team in Region Skåne. We have not only me there, but there are other really, really skilled and experienced engineers that know a lot about cloud. I am there because I know a lot about cloud. And we decide what goes. So we're trying our very best to be a good customer and set clear requirements on the suppliers. This is what you shall deliver, and this is the shape of your delivery. So It's no longer the case that we buy services from you in like a black box thing, and we run our things there and we're happy about them running, and then we just pay a bill. No, it's not there. That is not the thing anymore, right? It is more like we decide we own the governance story. And I think that's super key. And if you want to talk more about that stuff outside, we can definitely do that. And with this, we are definitely out of time. So please continue the conversation with me in the hall, but thank you for listening. Thank you for being part of this session.